Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Gillian Askew. I'll do some proper introductions in a second whilst people are joining. So we are here today for 45 minutes to look at the Procurement Act, the new regulations that are due to come into force in UK public sector, certainly in England and in Wales and Ireland. Scottish devolved administration does have slightly different regulations, but the Procurement Act of 2023 comes into force on the 24th of February, so next month. This webinar is for Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council, suppliers and local businesses, but everyone is welcome. So thank you everyone for taking your time out for this morning. We have got quite a lot to try and canter through over the next 45 minutes. So I'm going to be at fairly high level this morning. Hopefully you can all see the slides okay. I will be going at pace. So please do feel free to ask questions, pop stuff in the chat or the Q&A this morning. But if you do want more details or you'd like to have a further conversation with me, my contact details will be on the slide deck. So please do feel free to get in touch. So what we're going to try and cover this morning, firstly, just to let you know, the session is being recorded today. So a copy of the slide deck that I'm using today and a copy of the recording will be sent out to all registered attendees. So if you want to take some notes, please feel free, but don't feel you have to. I'll be covering this morning some key changes in the Procurement Act. We'll look at the central digital platform. We'll also have a brief look at dynamic markets and open frameworks and what they look like under the new regulations. We'll draw on some intelligence both from the marketplace, from suppliers, but also from buyers about some of the challenges around bidding in public sector and the impact thereof. I've got some information repositories for you to look at in terms of how best to get prepared for the regulations. And I think that will continue post the 24th of February as well. So we won't stop trying to help people get to grips with the regulations just as they go live. We'll continue to do so afterwards. And then I'm just going to pick up really briefly on social value and carbon net zero and some of what the Act is asking for around those things. And then hopefully we'll have time for some questions at the end. If not, and you do have questions, if I don't get time to answer them, I'll either answer the questions when I send the slide deck out, or we can speak separately from today. So just to say, my name is Gillian Askew. I'm one of 3 co-founders of a company called Go for Growth. If you've not attended one of our webinars before, welcome. Thank you for taking the time out. Go for Growth is a social enterprise, and our job, and we're commissioned by Rotherham Council, our job is to help support the marketplace for growth in public sector. So to help people to navigate the public sector environment, that's what we're here to try and do. And we'll do some of that by trying to give you some information today, but also we can do that outside of this meeting as well. So if I think about some of the key changes, we're going to chat through the things that you can see on screen. I'm going to talk through simplified bidding, what the transparency regime looks like. I'm going to talk through something called MEET versus MAT, and I'll explain those acronyms when I get there. We'll touch on supplier performance and contract management, the central digital platform, and as I said, dynamic markets and frameworks. Those are the affected areas that I'm going to try and cover today. There is something called the National Procurement Policy Statement. You might be familiar with it. It's not yet approved. So one of the reasons that the Act was delayed in going live, so it was due to go live on the 28th of October, now 24th of February, was so that the National Procurement Policy Statement could be ratified through government. So it hadn't gone through its parliamentary process. And what are we expecting from the National Procurement Policy Statement, and why is it important? So we expect to see, and we should get it on the 24th of February at the same time as the regulations go live, we expect to see the elements that are important to mission-driven government. So those themes that are important to the current Labour government should be reflected in the National Procurement Policy Statement. So things like kickstarting economic growth, so that economic stability, investment in jobs, support for small businesses and the self-employed, Also breaking down barriers to opportunity. So Labour's plan for economic growth has been developed for all UK businesses, but small firms and entrepreneurs and the self-employed, as identified by the government, face unique challenges. And that's why, in partnership, Labour has developed a plan for small businesses. Small businesses are, and this is terminology the government is using, the lifeblood in communities and high streets across the country. There'll also be some stuff around payments, I think, there. So taking action on late payment to ensure that small businesses and self-employed are paid on time, that kind of thing. Greater access to government contracts we expect to see, making it easier for small to medium enterprises to access capital, and thinking about reforming lending so that businesses can really step change that growth. So a lot of what the Chancellor and the Labour government are talking about in terms of economic growth, I think we'll see some of that at least flowing through into the National Procurement Policy Statement, which underpins the regulations. It's sort of the how, what's important to us, what are our values in procurement, and how will we take these regulations forward. Social value, social impact, social mobility, that kind of thing, wealth building, local wealth building, economic regeneration is likely to be in there. So skills development, job creation, job retention, etc., etc. And I don't know if anyone's aware, but there are 5.5 million businesses in the UK, of which 99.2% are classified as small businesses. That's 0 to 49 employees. The definition of a SME, a small to medium enterprise, is 0 to 249 employees. And that SME community delivers 61% of all employment in the UK and 53% of all turnover. So the impact that the SME community can have in both employment and economic growth is really significant. And contracting authorities throughout the regs will be tasked with ensuring that they can level the playing field, if you like, for SMEs, VCSEs, startups, sole traders, etc., so that everyone can compete in public procurement by not just reducing those barriers, but also taking steps where practicable to remove barriers in the procurement process. So we're going to start by looking at the simplified bidding process. So what you can see on the left-hand side is the procedures that the Public Contracting Regulations of 2015, so PCR 15, currently have, versus what we're moving to next month in terms of the Procurement Act 2023. So I'll start with the most popular procedure, which is the open procedure. And under the Procurement Act, largely it remains the same under Procurement Act as it did under PCR 15. It's a single stage process and there's no restriction to the number of submissions from bidders. It's likely, although not guaranteed, obviously, it's likely that contracting authorities will run this most often, especially if they were running open procedures before. I see no reason for that wouldn't continue, certainly in the main. Especially as some of the other elements, the competitive flexible procedure, are a little bit more complicated and complex, and they are new procedures. So whilst we're getting to grips with those new constructs, contracting authorities may well stick with something that they already know in that open procedure. And lots of bidders will be familiar with that open procedure, where you see an advertisement and you then seek to bid for it. The next available procedure on the Procurement Act is something called the competitive flexible procedure. And that pretty much replaces those 4 procedures you can see on the left-hand side under PCR 15. So it basically means that contracting authorities can design procurement competitions that deliver the best possible outcomes for the public purse, helping to encourage innovation when it's required. There are minimum requirements relating to notice publication in the competitive flexible procedure, and there are timescales that also have to be met. And unlike the open procedure, the competitive flexible procedure must be at least 2 stages. Contracting authorities can include more stages if they want to, but there will be at least 2. So there'll be some sort of selection and deselection going on in the competitive flexible procedure. It's if you look on the Go for Growth website at our events, you'll see that we've got some post-go live webinars with YPO coming up. And a couple of those will be, one will be looking at the competitive flexible procedure and really reflecting on, in the early days at least, how public sector are using the competitive flexible procedure, how many stages are we typically seeing, how is selection and deselection being utilised under the competitive flexible procedure. So as we learn more, we'll certainly be trying to impart that information out to the marketplace more. And then we have something called direct award. You might be familiar with the terminology if you are on frameworks or using frameworks. Direct award, you might use or know in conjunction with, actually, you can, a contracting authority can direct award to a supplier through a framework if that capability exists. That isn't what direct award means under the Procurement Act. It basically means that contracting authorities can award a new contract to a supplier without engaging in any prior competitive process. That said, and it's replacing the negotiated procedure without prior publication, but like with that procedure under PCR 15, direct award can only be used in certain circumstances. There is a list of justifications for using direct award in the regulations 41 to 43 under the Procurement Act. So it isn't a free-for-all. It can only be used in a certain set of circumstances. But what does this all mean for you as a supplier? And it largely depends actually on what processes the public sector buyers are using. If they continue to run a lot of open procedures, then as suppliers and bidders, we might not see a whole set of anything new. But in respect of dynamic markets and open frameworks that I'm coming on to, and the competitive flexible procedure, they are different. And so what we're advising buyers and suppliers is that more support, continued support, and that updated guidance and information is going to be really important, especially in that competitive flexible procedure where there are variations to how they can work. From a transparency perspective, so unlike Public Contract Regulations 2015, PCR 15, the new Procurement Act doesn't explicitly state transparency. Instead, transparency is demonstrated through this new notice obligations regime, and it will span the full life cycle of procurement. So contracting authorities who are running their own procurement processes will be required to publish more notices than ever from when the regulations go live next month at every single procurement stage. And this includes market, pre-market engagement, and right through to contract management. And so the number of notices, as you can see on screen, goes from 5 to 15. The question, I guess, is around advertising opportunities. And I'm going to talk about the central digital platform in a bit more detail, but all of these notices will be in one place. So they will be on the central digital platform. And more notices is good from a market perspective. Certainly, in my opinion, it does mean there is greater visibility and greater transparency around things like pipeline, planned procurement, that preliminary market engagement notice. We will hopefully see a lot more information earlier on in the procurement life cycle. It is worth noting that the pipeline under the regulations is stipulated at over 2 million in value. And of course, as smaller organisations, we're very rarely, if ever, looking at opportunities above 2 million. The bigger medium-sized enterprises might be and will be, but smaller organisations typically not. So that's what the regulations say. However, lots of public sector organisations will be publishing pipelines to a much lower level, but they may not be publishing the pipeline notice that goes with it unless that's above 2 million. The central digital platform, when I get to it, I'll tell you more about it, but it is a mandatory registration. So if you do want to take part in public sector opportunities, you will need to be registered to the central digital platform, and it will be a key repository of information. And I'll tell you more about that in a second. But from a transparency perspective, we will see lots more information and lots more notices coming out than we have done before. So MEET versus MAT, what does this all mean? So MEET stands for the most economically advantageous tender, and MAT stands for the most advantageous tender. And it actually, in practical terms, shouldn't cause too many issues for either buyers or suppliers. Hopefully, it's more of a terminology shift than one of any real substance. But But effectively what it's talking about is removing economic from the acronym. And it's basically saying there is no pressure from the public sector to award based on price. Now, when I talk to the marketplace, this could be a very useful tool because it can often still feel like a fastest race to the bottom, but that pressure isn't there from a procurement perspective. What MEAT does currently is focus primarily on those economic factors such as cost and price. It will also consider other criteria, so it involves a structured evaluation process that if you've been bidding before, you'll be familiar with, and it assigns specific weightings to various evaluation criteria such as price or quality, technical capabilities, or even social and environmental considerations. And bidders are scored based on their performance against those criteria, and there'll be weighted criteria. The contract is then awarded to the bidder with the highest overall score. MEAT does aim to strike a balance between economic factors and other relevant considerations to ensure best value for money. But MAT is trying to take an even broader view of the advantages and benefits that can be delivered, including social and environmental, and it's not limited to leading on those economic factors. So MAT seeks to consider a wider range of criteria and qualitative aspects, including technical expertise, innovation, sustainability, and those social considerations. The evaluation process will continue to utilise that structured evaluation process that we're familiar with, assigning specific weightings to various evaluation criteria. But what we expect to see under MAT is higher weightings for non-economic or non-cost related aspects. And MAT's really seeking to select the tender that provides the most advantages overall, which may or may not be the lowest cost option. Obviously, procurement, no procurer worth their salt, and I've been in procurement for 30 years, will ever apologise for worrying about the money, and nor should we. However, procurement is tasked with delivering broader benefit, and that value for money piece is very subjective. So each procurement will be individually looking at what the most advantageous tender looks like, and the weightings should be proportionate and relevant to what we're aiming to deliver through it. I'm just going to quickly look at the Q&A. So we've got 2 mil pipeline notices, an annual contract value or the whole contract. My understanding is, and I'll double check it, but my understanding is that it's a 2 million whole contract value. But that's my understanding. I will double check and I'll confirm if it's any different when the slide deck goes out. So over the changes for light touch regime tenders, the minimum time for notice and tender process is removed for light touch under the new act. I would need to check that actually. So the threshold isn't changing for light touch regime, but I would need to double check in terms of minimum time for notice and tender process and see if that has changed. So I will check both of those things out and come back through the Q&A when I send the slide deck out. Thank you for the questions. In terms of supplier performance and contract management, the main message here, and I'll go through some of the elements in a second, is that things like supplier performance management, KPIs, the supplier debarment list especially, can feel like a really scary place for smaller businesses, especially those that haven't necessarily been managed in that way before. It does, of course, mean that there is a greater focus on contract management and performance, and it will reduce the ability for bidders to greenwash or overpromise and then underdeliver, but that largely is good news. What I see in the vast majority of organisations that we're supporting, and we're supporting around 20,000 businesses, of which around 93% will be micro or small, actually we're performing really well. And so having that performance as a matter of public record could be a really useful sales tool for us. It can be a great use of evidence for other bids in terms of our performance management metrics, to be able to use how good we are to showcase and help it as a growth mechanism going forward. The debarment list, I think, I don't want to call it a red herring because it is a real thing, but actually It's a very robust process. If you are an excluded or excludable supplier, you will have largely fallen foul to something fairly substantial. So it might be that there has been an environmental issue, or that there has been fraud, etc., etc. So there is a list of what it means to be excluded or excludable that you can find. And of course, you can appeal it, and you're not on the debarment list forever. So, and you will also, any supplier would be communicated with around being disbarred. So we have right of reply as suppliers. I think it is a good thing to have there because we, as providers to the public sector, I think it feels right that we should be accountable for what we do and how we do it. I think it will take a lot to be on the debarment list. That's a very personal opinion, but that we shouldn't overtly worry about it as a construct in and of itself. It is there to be useful and helpful to the supply of public services. And for the vast majority of businesses, it will never be a factor. So the central digital platform, it will be an extension of the Find a Tender service. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with FTS, the Find a Tender service. At the moment, it is where the above threshold tender opportunities are published. All notices that I talked about in that transparency regime will be published there, as will procurement pipelines. The supplier performance information will be held there, as will disbarment and KPI reporting. So it is a central repository for all of this information. There will be something called the supplier information system. So when we've registered, we will be able to upload some of our information, and this will be phased over time. So such as who we are, where we are, how big we are, our technical capability, our competencies around which contracts we've run before, etc., and our financial standing. And in the fullness of time, we should also be able to upload things like our accreditations, licenses, insurances, etc. And whatever is in that supplier information system on day one, my understanding is that it will pull through to the procurement portal. So whilst we'll still be bidding in the individual portals, what we put in that central digital platform information-wise will pull through, so we won't have to enter that twice. And so that feels like a real benefit for smaller businesses. In bids, what we are often doing is regurgitating the same information. So the design of the central digital platform is really trying to tangibly reduce the amount of repetition and duplication that bidders have to go through. As I said before, it is a mandatory registration for suppliers. What I'm hopeful of, and I don't know this for certain, but I'm hopeful of, is that it will go live on a phased approach prior to the 24th. Certainly that's what we're expecting. We haven't seen anything yet. It may be that it is live from the 24th of February, but what we will have to do is register on that as soon as we can, because that will give us access to all the opportunities, information that we need to continue to bid and find opportunities. So next up, dynamic markets and frameworks. So dynamic markets will replace what is the dynamic purchasing system. And there is one key difference, actually. So the DPSs are often used for under threshold opportunities. They weren't necessarily designed for that, but in practical terms, DPSs have been a really useful tool for public sector organisations to use for some of the under threshold, lower value opportunities. And for goods and services, for anyone that doesn't know, the current threshold is, including VAT, £214,904. And for works, it's around 5.376 million, something like that. And the light touch regime is a little over 638,000 threshold, I think. So the dynamic market will replace DPS, but the dynamic market, unless something changes prior to the 24th, and again, I'm hopeful that it will, but there's no guarantee, they will be for above threshold opportunities only. They will cover goods, services and works, and they will continue to be always open in the same way that a dynamic purchasing system is. So a dynamic market and a DPS as is now, it doesn't close for any period of time. It is always open, and you can apply multiple times. I asked the question in a webinar that we did with YPO last month, earlier this month actually, on frameworks and dynamic markets, where we went into much more detail. Was there any limit to how many times you could apply to join the dynamic market if you'd been unsuccessful? And we don't know of any cap on that limit. What you do get if you are unsuccessful is your feedback, and so you can work through how to be successful in the future. So the dynamic market will replace DPSs. Frameworks, as they stand now, we have a closed framework, typically up to 4 years, but what will be offered in addition to a closed framework is something called an open framework. An open framework can be open up to 8 years, provided they are reopened for competition at years 3 and 5. So currently, if you get onto a framework, you're on it for 4 years. But if you don't get onto it, the opportunity is then closed to you for 4 years. An open framework means that there are more opportunities to join it, and it could be that they're reopened on an annual basis, or it could be reopened in year 2. So as long as they are reopened multiple times, at the very latest by the end of year 3, and again by the end of year 5, but it could be sooner than that, then an open framework can last for 8 years, and you will have more than one opportunity to join it. Also, if you are on it, and I would refer everyone to that webinar that we ran looking specifically at frameworks and dynamic markets. If you're already on it, when it reopens, you have the opportunity to rebid. So you can use your original bid and have that go through evaluation again, or if you have new pricing or a new offer, etc., you can also rebid. So you have more opportunities in an open framework, and the light touch regime continues to be in place. So what does this mean for suppliers? There are some really great things, I think, that the Act is trying to engender, especially for smaller organisations. So increased competition. We should have more access to opportunities. Those barriers to entry and growth should be reducing and being removed. We will have longer relationship term potential. So especially if we are in an open framework and stay on that framework for 8 years, I believe personally that the performance tracking could be a real positive for those well-performing businesses to be able to showcase what they're doing, and therefore it gives us more opportunities potentially for growth and scale. There is something called the assessment summary. So if you are bidding for an opportunity that is over the threshold, the assessment summary is the feedback process. And what that is aiming to do is give good quality, detailed feedback to unsuccessful and successful bidders, but especially for those that are unsuccessful, so that actually we can use that feedback to be able to develop and improve both our business and our bid skills going forward. And of course, the central digital platform is aiming to put everything in one place, which will be useful for smaller organisations, especially when we're not having to trawl lots of different repositories for information. I will just have a quick check on Q&A. Are there specific frameworks or dynamic purchasing systems that low barrier consumables fall under? How can suppliers register for them? So there are frameworks. There may be DPSs, dynamic purchasing systems, for some lower value opportunities. At the moment, you can go on Contracts Finder or Find a Tender Service or the individual procurement portals to find them. When we get the central digital platform, all of those opportunities will be on there. One thing to say about the dynamic purchasing systems, if you're relying on the alert services on things like Contracts Finder, the portals, and Find a Tender Service, a DPS in its current format is unlikely to be advertised proactively other than the first time it's actually launched. Because it's always open, it doesn't therefore close and reopen to be advertised. So the alert services might not be telling you that they exist. So my advice would be have a look through Contracts Finder and Find a Tender Service, because they will show you all the open opportunities to see what's available. And then how you register for those will be in the instructions for each individual opportunity. It will tell you how to do that. One thing just to say as well, where dynamic purchasing systems are in place, they will continue to be in place. So what we'll have, anything that is put out into the market before the 24th of February will continue for its full term under the current regulations. Anything from the 24th of February will be let under the Procurement Act 2023. So we will have concurrent regulatory frameworks that are running, which is to my first point in here. We will have both things at play. So we will have DPSs that are already out there in the marketplace or who are being launched prior to the 24th of February, and then dynamic markets that are being launched from the 24th of February. So when we're looking for opportunities, it will be important to see what type of opportunity it is and which set of regulations it was being run under. That guidance and support, it will need to continue. So as I said at the top of the session today, when we get to the 24th, we don't stop there. Actually, we really start to properly learn about the execution of the regulations at that point. And we get the National Procurement Policy Statement, which is a really important guidance and document for us. So that guidance and support from contracting authorities and from people like Go for Growth will only seek to continue. We are still coaching people on the public contract regulations of 2015, and we'll continue to do that. And we're adding to that guidance on Procurement Act 2023. I wanted to raise awareness at lots of the resources and knowledge, especially that from the Cabinet Office, and I've got some links for it, is free of charge to access, although there are some costs. So if you're going to the Procurement Act Expo, for example, next month, which is on the 27th, I believe, if you're a private sector organisation, you will need to pay to go along. It's a small-ish fee, but there are some costs to go to some of the events or to get access to some of the resources and knowledge. So please do just bear that in mind, but the vast majority of it is free to access. The competitively flexible procedure will be a learning curve for all of us, including the public sector. So we'll need to guide and learn as we go. And that debarment, supplier measurement and contract management, my glass is very much half full on that. I think it feels like a really positive process. It will do the job that it's intended to do. But if I talk about Go for Growth, we think that we deliver what we're supposed to deliver. So having that measurement in the public domain, we think would be useful for us as an organisation. I wanted to just give you some intelligence about what does this all look like for the marketplace, and then what's the procurement view. So there are no closed doors in Go for Growth. Any organisation from any sector of any size can come to us for support and help. Unsurprisingly, most of the help that we're giving is going to micro, sole traders or small businesses, and we're supporting around 20,000. We are commissioned by Rotherham Council, so we're very active in that Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council environment and the wider South Yorkshire region, as well as nationally. So if anybody requires any further support, do give us a shout. But this is some of the stuff that the marketplace is telling us. So the top two elements of where the marketplace are saying they need some support is how do we demonstrate our value to public sector procurers? And we would be keen to develop our bid writing skills. We get a sense that in the marketplace, we're supporting the artisans, the experts. There's so much talent in the marketplace, and that's what the public sector are trying to access. The competitive process is a regulated process, and that's what I've been talking us through so far today. And so it's right and proper that has to have some scrutiny and some rigor around it. But that also can cause some challenges or barriers in and of itself. And so the marketplace is saying to us, please help us with our bid writing skills so that we can be successful in our endeavours. And we've got lots of bid skills stuff available. If you are local to Rotherham and Barnsley, we have a 2-hour session in person on the 6th of March. You can find details from our Eventbrite page, and it'll be on our website this week as well, where we're doing some very practical stuff around how to engage with a bid, how to find it in the first place, how to navigate it, how to answer quality questions, what social value means, all the rest of it. So please do feel free to have a look at that if you would like to come along. And then actually, we polled 150 buyers with YPO through an iGov survey, and you can see the whole survey through that link. And when we asked people what some of the barriers to SME adoption were, 64% of that procurement community that we polled said bid competition capability was a potential barrier. And so actually, my point for bringing this up is both the marketplace and the procurement community agree that much more support needs to be given to help businesses to navigate that procurement process. So again, please feel free to have a look at our bid skills. Lots of resources on our website around it if that's helpful. So what do we do to get prepared? There's lots going on at the minute, especially in this final flush up to the 24th of February. If you've got time, attend as much as you can. Lots of webinars like today, even if you can't make it, they'll be recorded and you'll get the slide deck, and they are often free of charge to go to. So you can, even if you can't make it real time, you can get the information from the webinar afterwards. Anything we can do to prepare to take part in competitions outside of the competition process itself is always going to stand us in good stead. And you can assess whether you've got everything in your toolkit to take part. I'll send you a link to this, but we have something called the Public Sector Supply Ready Accreditation, which is a free of charge accreditation. It lasts for a year, and it really seeks to work as a bit of a gap analysis on what are those things that I need to have in my toolkit for almost all those general elements for any public sector opportunity. So if that's useful, we've got 44 businesses going through that accreditation at the moment. And some businesses have told us that the accreditation itself has actually triggered them winning some more work or getting onto frameworks, etc. I won't pick out all of these, but your digital capability is important, and we can help you with that if you need it. All of the bid opportunities are going to be via a digital process. And depending on what kind of business you are, your access to the right kind of technology is going to be important. So, but we can help you with that. If you're not familiar with how to run portals, etc., you can certainly get in touch with Go for Growth and we will help. There are knowledge drops that are out there from the Cabinet Office. There's a wealth of information. There are live links in here so you can see, excuse me, for all suppliers, and then specifically for small to medium enterprises and voluntary community and social enterprises. They are live links in here that will take you straight through to the knowledge drops. And really just to bring up the rear at the end, and then we'll open up for questions in a second. Excuse me, I'm just going to cough. Sorry about that. Social value, as we know, is becoming increasingly important in the public sector, but it's not new. The Public Services Act of 2012 was assented to law in January 2013. That's 12 years ago now. Excuse me, such a frog in my throat. Weightings for social value can be anything between 10 and 20%. So it is true that social value can be bid winning. It also can be bid losing. The Procurement Act has a real focus and emphasis on social value. Oh, forgive me, I'm so sorry. On flexibility, transparency, and the modernisation of procurement processes. The Act is really aiming to make sure that contracting authorities are acting with integrity, treating suppliers equitably, promoting a fair and green, innovative procurement process. So the intention is that the process will not only be transparent, but also adaptable, allowing for competitive and flexible approach in selecting suppliers based on that most advantageous tender rather than that economic criteria solely. And furthermore, the Act mandates greater transparency through that procurement life cycle. It's worth pointing out that in Rotherham Council, they work with Social Value Portal. So if you are a supplier to Rotherham Council, or you are looking to bid for contracts in the future, the Social Value Portal is the mechanism that's used. And I've popped a link on this slide to the Social Value Portal so you can have a look for more information. And then just on climate emergency, so Rotherham Council declared climate emergency back in 2019, but more than 300 local authorities have declared climate emergency, including 91% of London boroughs. The NHS as a whole has recognised climate emergency as a key health emergency. And they are working towards becoming the world's first net zero health service, not next zero health service, net zero. Universities UK tells us that all UK universities have signed up to commitments to tackle climate emergency. And also the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, APCC, in collaboration with the National Police Chiefs Council and Blue Light Commercial, launched a policing decarbonisation programme in November 2021. In addition, there is a policy note 0621, so June 2021, where in law it says that opportunities above 5 million must have a carbon reduction plan in place. But we're seeing that being asked for at much lower value tenders. And actually, we use our carbon reduction plan as a way, through bids especially, of showing our commitment to net zero and the broader environmental requirements. The final thing to say, and then we'll look for questions, is this can feel like it's a massive thing. It can feel like and if you're in a small business, it can feel like a very lonely place to be. Help is on hand. You are not alone. Go for Growth is here to help you. All our contact details are on there. Access to the accreditation is here through that link. And we also have a short course here as well that you can click on, which is on the Procurement Act, and it will just refresh some of the information that we've gone through today, if that's useful. And I will not do that. I will just click onto questions. I'll stop sharing and see how we are looking in chat and Q&A. I apologise for the coughing fit that went on in there. I seem to have got over it now. Thank you for sticking with me. I know that there was a lot of information in there. We've had something in the Q&A saying thank you for the presentation. We will send the recording out. If it's not today, by latest, it will be close of business tomorrow. And I'll just look at the chat. So yes, I didn't have a drink to take, sadly. So I was struggling a second there. But thank you for your patience, everyone, with me as I had a small coughing fit. What are the common compliance pitfalls in contract management and supplier performance that new suppliers should be aware of to maintain good standing with the council? Such a good question, actually. So what do I think the answer to this is? There are two parts to any contract, I think. So there is the key performance indicators that are in there. So any contract that you take out should be very clear in terms of what you have to do in order to be compliant and how that compliance will be measured as a contract. And it should be very clear what the construct is in terms of measuring that. So is it measured via a data report that you need to give, a narrative report that you need to give? Is it measured via a contract review meeting on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis? It should be very clear when you're bidding what those constructs are, what you'll be held to account for, and how you would be measured for that. So that's one part of it. But a contract is also, it's a cultural thing. And there's a very human element to procurement and supply. So people are buying from people and people are delivering these contracts. And so the cultural element of the contract, I think, is also just as important. What are we trying to achieve? What are the outcomes? And how do we want to work together? And how do we build our relationship? How do we build that mutual trust? What does that look and feel like for us? And that's often very difficult to just write down because it's nuanced and it's human and it's real and it's about relationships. But there should be some indications in those things from a contract perspective in terms of how we'll communicate and that kind of thing. And so from a compliance perspective, you'd be looking out for what do I have to do and when, and how do I know what good looks like, and how do I know if I've been successful in that contract? That should be really clear. But I would always encourage a conversation with your new client around how shall we talk, how will we do that, how will we run this relationship, what's really important to you, those kind of cultural things as well. Let me just see if we've got anything else in Q&A. I know we're coming up to time. What are the key steps and requirements for a new supplier to get listed as an approved vendor for Rotherham Council or any other councils under the new Procurement Act? So it will largely be a similar process for all public contracting authorities, in that what they don't typically have is one giant approved provider list. So each procurement competition, and that might be a preferred supplier list or an approved provider list for that specific competition in social care, for example, but each opportunity will have a registration process. So what you'll do is you'll register to the central digital platform, and that will give you those opportunities that you're looking for, let's say, Rotherham Council in this instance. If it is, that's above threshold. If it is below threshold, so if you're looking at 5,000, 10,000, 30,000, anything up to that 214,000, you would look at the Rotherham Council contract procedure rules. They will tell you what process they use at what level. So above threshold, they will be under the Procurement Act regulations, but under threshold, in the majority, it will go to what their contract procedure rules are. So it will say, for example, and I'm making this up, but for example, it might say at £5,000, we will ask for 3 quotes, and we aim to get at least one of those quotes from a local provider, something along those lines. So have a look at the Rotherham Council contract procedure rules. I'll put a link to it in the slide deck when the email comes out. Have a look at that, and that will tell you what they do up to that threshold level. Is the perception that dynamic markets can be used for goods and works and services above 215k and not below? So the dynamic market can only be used where the call-off contract is above the threshold, so that 214,904, including VAT. So typically the whole value of the dynamic market will be above that anyway, but each competition under that has to be above that threshold. It can't be below it. It would be definitely worth having a look at the Frameworks and Dynamic Markets webinar. The video of that is on our YouTube, so have a look at that, because it will go into a lot more detail around it, especially around that threshold for dynamic markets. If a supplier, and I'll take this as the last one because we are over time, if a new supplier wants to be a supplier for cleaning equipment, person who's stay-at-home mum wants to take this opportunity, registering company, what do you need? So you don't need to have a limited company. A sole trader can apply for an opportunity, but and each opportunity will tell you what you need in terms of your insurances, your accreditations, your licenses. However, if you're a startup business in Rotherham, have a look at Rotherham Council's support and the Rotherham and Barnsley Chambers and Federation of Small Businesses. There's lots of support for startups, and what they'll be able to do is say, if you're in this sector, this is typically the type of things you would need to have in place. So if you're going to be a cleaning company, you'll likely need this license, this accreditation, this health and safety stuff, etc., etc. So there's lots of help for startups out there locally, and local authorities are really strong at that. So have a look at Rotherham Council's support for local startups. I'm going to finish it there. Thank you ever so much. We are 3 minutes over. Apologies. Thank you again for sticking with me, and hopefully that's been useful and helpful. Do get in touch if we can be of any more help, and I'll get the slide deck, a link to Rotherham's CPRs out in that, and a copy of the recording, if not today, certainly by close of business tomorrow. Thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your Thursday. Thank you.